Hi, this is Ronda Degaust with LifePotentialDevelopments.com, international NLP trainer, coach, columnist, and author of How to Heal from Years of Criticism, Insults, Abuse, and Rejection. With me is Roger Ellerton, a well-respected NLP trainer, coach, speaker, management consultant, and author of 5 NLP books. Great to have you back, Roger.
Great, thank you, Rhonda. Good to speak with you again.
In our last interview, Roger, we discussed Chapter 5 in your book and paid particular attention to establishing rapport through matching. So in this next chapter in your book, it's about understanding other people, the other person. And obviously it's about asking questions for clarification, the person's needs, maybe their objections to certain points that they raised, which may not be, maybe be a little bit more confusing or have a different interpretation.
That's right. As you mentioned, the previous one was establishing rapport, a comfort zone, so we can have a meaningful conversation with the other person. And now, again, building on that, we continue to want to pay attention just to make sure we understand if they're more visual versus kinesthetic or something like that, or they have more of a towards and away from program. But we also want to start to verify the needs, because if you remember before meeting these people, we did a preliminary assessment of what their needs are, as I called them their rights, and now we have them in front of us. So it's a matter of verifying, and one of the best ways to do that is, of course, asking questions. And far too often we don't ask questions; we just make assumptions. And one of the things I thought was really interesting, by the way, is about a week ago. I was watching TV, and there's a program that you may be familiar with, or our viewers may be, called Undercover Boss.
Yep.
And they had the president of the Dwyer Group, which has a number of franchises. A couple of them that come to mind are Mr. Rooter, Mr. Electric, and Glass Doctor, I think, and there's a couple of others. But they have a set of values that they want their franchisees to live by. And one of them, what I thought was really great, and that is to say, and one of their values is to ask questions if we do not understand or disagree. And that's what this chapter is about. Because far too often we think we agree or we think we understand, but we don't. So it's about asking some clarifying questions to help us understand what the other person's needs are, or what their potential objections are, and so forth. And as you know, and possibly those who are watching who have studied NLP, there's a thing called meta model, which is a series of questions that were modeled from two therapists. And this is really great for getting clarity in terms of what a person says. However, we're talking about business here, and fortunately, John Grinder and Michael McMaster developed a subset of questions they call it the precision model, which really allows us to get clarity in a business or family context, which is non-therapeutic. So it's a matter of you and I are meeting as family members, and we're having a discussion maybe about our vacation or so forth, and you may be using some words that make a lot of sense to you, but and I have a different interpretation of them. And just before we go in different directions in our thought process, maybe it's good for us to get clarity on what some of those words mean. Or we might be in a business or sales context as well. So what I thought we'd do in the time we have is go through these examples. What I would do is maybe just give a brief discussion of what it is, and then throw out an example for you and see how you can respond to it in terms of gaining clarity in terms of what I've said. Would that be all right?
Well, that would be great.
Yeah. Now, what I should say, too, is although from instruction purposes, at least the way I see it, it's nice to categorize these questions. However, when I'm talking to somebody, I'm not sitting there thinking, oh, this is that sort of category of question. I'm more asking of, they've said something, do I fully understand what they've said? Or is there an interpretation I've made that may mislead me? And if there is, maybe I should ask a question. So having said that, let's go through 5 of them here. And first one is there's lack of clarity on who or what we're talking about. And so it's a matter of just asking a question. If you don't understand who it is, clarify. Because sometimes we'll say something like, well, she said so-and-so. And I think it's one person, you're actually talking about somebody else. And so if there's any doubt, I should ask about that. So I prepared a couple of questions here. So to keep them simple, so I'll look at them every now and again. And the first one, I'll in this context, I'll ask you, he needs help. So I just said that to you, and so what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, there's only 3 little words, so obviously there's a lot of information missing, and there's a lot of things that I don't notice, right? So rather than, you know, trying to attack all of it, just sort of make it simple for illustration purposes, we think, okay, who is he?
Absolutely.
You know, and what is meant by helping? Like, or what help does this person need? For example, what are your thoughts on the help this person needs? You know, so you might actually ask who he is to begin with, but also what help does this person need? So you're getting more information because the sentence is only 3 little words, and we don't have enough information, so that would give more clarification on what was missing in the actual statement or sentence that the person says.
Absolutely. So you and I could be parents of a child, and I could say that the child needs help. And you think he needs help in one way, and I think in another way. And if we don't get that clarification, then tomorrow when we're talking about, Rhonda, why didn't you help him? Well, I did. Well, that's not what he needed help in.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Just get clarification of what we mean. So the next type of question is clarity on the action that I'm requesting. So quite often, and this is talking about the verb in the sentence, and what do we mean by that verb? So the one I'll ask you here is, or ask you, I might say, Rhonda, please improve on how you work.
Yeah, and of course there would be an assumption there of what you meant by improve. So I could ask a question, you know, because your interpretation of improve would be different than my interpretation of improve. Yeah. So therefore, how would you like for me to improve? Or perhaps, how would you know I have improved? So that way I would have some sort of gauge to know what you mean by improve and where I'm going in order to improve according to your standards of improve.
Absolutely. And having that knowledge, I can coach you, or we can have discussions in terms of how well you're doing. So that opens up an opportunity for us to work together instead of at odds with each other. So another type of question is, quite often people make comparisons, and the comparisons are not obvious. In fact, when you think about it, I think we're making comparisons, I mean, in almost every other sentence and so forth. I mean, how often do you say something is good? The only way you can know something is good is that you have some idea of what you're comparing that thing to. So, and of course, some others, you know, one that's very common is I want something that's better, or you know, you see on detergents new and improved. So we see that quite often. So the question is, like, what are you comparing it to? So I might say to you, oh, Rhonda, this TV is better.
And then, of course, I could respond, better than what? Compared to what? So that way I have an understanding what your comparison is comparing it to.
Exactly. And maybe even the context why I'm making that comparison. So now, again, we can be on the same wavelength to have a meaningful discussion instead of you thinking one thing and me thinking something different. Another one is that quite often, I mean, I've done it, I'm sure you've done it, I'm sure our viewers have done it, is that we talk to one or two people, and based on that conversation, we make a generalization about what people say, and we might say, well, the family believes this, or we might say, and you hear the politicians quite often, the people want this, and so in other words, based on 1, 2, 3, a dozen conversations, we generalize it to a lot larger group, and so I may say to you, your employees don't think this will work. Yeah,
exactly. And the question, if you're thinking, well, employees, who are they? Who are the employees? Who specifically are these employees, so that you have actual reference to who they're talking about?
Absolutely. And I've been a management consultant, and quite often you get into a business organization, and somebody will say, staff here don't believe this. And so if you take that as said, you go, oh my God, this is a major problem. Whereas you ask, well, who specifically? Oh, Fred and Bill are down at the water cooler all the time. You know, oh, well, okay, that puts a different context or complexion on this issue here. And now I know what I'm really working with. So far too often people generalize, and we see it as a major problem, when all we need to do is like, who specifically? Or everybody? And that's another one. Everybody thinks this. And you can always say, well, everybody? And then the last one that I think is very important is that quite often in our conversation, we put limits on what's possible. And for example, I may say, I shouldn't do this, or I can't do this. And it puts a limit, and it really closes down my model of the world, what's possible for me. And far too often when someone says that to us, we buy into it and say, oh, that's too bad. Okay, I understand. And, we help them stay in their small little box. So let's suppose I say to you, Rhonda, I can't present your request to the boss.
Yeah, so that would be a limitation. You're saying you can't.
Absolutely.
So I could ask something like, well, what stops you? Or what would happen if you did?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that opens up, nothing really, I guess. Negative. And if I did, then we may make some difference here. So that really opens up a different way to look at it, depending whether I'm looking at it from a negative perspective or just don't see any value in it. And it opens up a conversation for you and I to have about how we can proceed. So anyway, those are the 5 that fall into what's called the precision model, and I think they're very, very useful. And again, one of the things is these questions are asked with rapport, with respect. And one of the things I didn't say that I do it in situations when I'm either with a coaching situation or an influence situation or something I don't understand, is I'll say to the person something along the lines, is it okay if I ask you a question? And I say it with care and respect instead of, can I ask you a question? No, is it okay if I ask you a question? And of course, 99% of the time people say, well, sure. And then they're open to me asking the question. And of course, if they're open to it, then most likely I'm going to get a really good answer from them instead of surprising them. So it's always nice to ask them first so I can ask questions, and that opens up the whole dialogue of getting clarity of what their needs are, what their objections might be, or just how they're feeling. Maybe they don't feel like having a good conversation about this right now. So it gets some clarity, and then we can move forward in a very respectful manner for both you and for me.
Absolutely. And in your book on Chapter 6, there's actually several more examples that you use to, where you present the question and how to actually present the statement, and then all the questions that the person could ask according to that particular one. So for those that want to learn more, you can go to read Chapter 6 in Roger's book. And for more information on or listening to more of these discussions, search out the Win-Win Influence. Thanks for coming, Roger.
That's great. Talk again soon.
Okay.